friends, welcome to today's video. Today I'm going to be showing you what I have stocked in my favorites, my MAC favorites, that is. Let me give you some background. Let me rewind here a little bit. So for those of you who don't know, I used to work for MAC years ago. I left MAC in 2007, but that's where I started my career in makeup. And when I left MAC, I did wedding makeup for quite a while, probably 10 years. Off and on, I did wedding makeup. And then at one point I had a pretty busy business doing wedding makeup. I had about 5 other artists that worked with me, and we were pretty busy here in Austin, Texas. And anyway, I was cleaning out my beauty room the other night and I came across this palette that I had in my professional kit. This is pretty much what I would take when I would go do wedding makeup. And so I pretty much use this palette on all brides. And I thought I would show you the shades that I had stocked in this palette because these truly are kind of the shades that I personally picked out as being just the most versatile, the best neutrals for beauty makeup. You know, if you think about bridal makeup, most brides want to look naturally beautiful. Even brides that want to look really glamorous, they want to stick with neutral shades for the most part. Of course, that's not everyone's style, but I found myself always doing this really kind of beautiful neutral makeup application on my clients. And when you go do wedding makeup, whenever you're a makeup artist, you really have to be strategic with the products that you pack in your kit because you're limited kind of to what you can carry. It's not like you can pack up all these IKEA dressers and bring them with you to each job. You have to have the products that you know can handle any situation that might arise, or any type of skin type, coloration, all of that good stuff. So this one palette was my most used palette, or the shades that I most use. Obviously I had to restock them and replenish them, but these shades are the shades that I would use most of the time, and a lot of my favorites from MAC. So I asked you guys on Instagram if you wanted to see what was in this palette, and I got a ton of yeses, so that's what this video is going to be about. All right, let's get started. So I had this palette, and I tried to do the blushes on one side and shadows on the other, but it just didn't quite work out. These blushes would always fall. But I had, shadows here on this side. You can see for the most part, they're all pretty neutral. And then I had a good mix of kind of peachy, pink, rosy blushes, mostly matte. I did have a couple of shimmer here, but I do want to swatch and show you each of these shades. So let's get started. Okay, so the first shade that I used more than any other shade ever probably is MAC's good old vanilla eyeshadow. It's just a nice, pretty matte vanilla shade is what it is. I will show you what it looks like. It's nothing special, but it's something that I used on almost everyone. I always found myself using this shade on eyebrow highlights, so right under the brow, just to give a bit of pop there because it is so bright. Sometimes I'd add a shimmer on top of that, but I always wanted to have that bright base there. Then next I had the shade Naked Lunch, and I have to say I'm not quite sure if all of these shades are still in stock. This palette is probably 2 or 3 years old. The last time I probably used this palette was 2 years ago or so, so some of these shades might have been discontinued, but this is the shade Naked Lunch, and it is a shimmery, frosty, really soft, like angel pink. It's just the softest hint of pink, kind of like a champagne shade. This color I would use on darker skin tones. I would use this underneath the brow as a highlight, but I could use this on everyone all over the lid if they liked a brighter lid with a bit of shimmer. Then the shade similar to that, it looks very similar in the pan, but when it goes on the skin, it looks very different. It's called All That Glitters, and this shade is more of like a rose gold. It kind of leans more on the gold side than rosy side, but it definitely has some pink tones to it, and it does have a high shimmer texture. So this is going to reflect light really nicely, and you can pair it with browns, you can pair it with purples. It's a really versatile shade for all over. And then this might go down as one of my favorite MAC shadows. It is the shadow Ricepaper, and it is the most beautiful gold shimmer shade without being too yellow or without being too intense. It just gives the prettiest sheen to the skin. It's not frosty. It's more of a beautiful sheen, but it's very vibrant. I absolutely love this shade. This works on someone of my coloring underneath the brow and all over the lid. If you're really, really fair, it might be too deep for your brow bone. It might turn too yellow. But anyone that's my shade or darker, this is such a beautiful brow highlight. And then a very close runner up to that is the shade Nylon. Now Nylon looks very similar to Ricepaper in the pan, but when this goes on the skin, it is so in your face shimmer in like light reflective. It is so beautiful. I think this shade is so beautiful if you like a really high impact frost on the lid. And it's so bright. It's such a beautiful formula and beautiful shade. I also have the shade Mylar in here, which looks very similar to vanilla, but it is more white. When it translates on the skin, it has more of a white tone to it, where the vanilla has a bit of that kind of yellow base to it. Okay, so let's move into transition shades. So the transition shades that I kept in my palette at all times was the shade Kid. This is a really pretty, like soft to mid-tone matte shadow. You'll find that all the transition shades I would keep in this palette were matte. I really like a matte transition shade to create more definition, because matte recedes light and it creates that illusion of a more defined in-depth crease. This is a neutral brown, but it has a little bit of pink to it. It translates on the skin a little bit more pink. That one's really pretty. I would use this on really fair tone skin tones, fair to light medium-ish. This is a nice shade for them. For someone a little bit deeper in coloring and someone that maybe wanted to lean more on like the pink or rosy tone shades on the eyes, I would use the shade Quarry. This definitely leans more of like a mauvey purple shade, but it's so beautiful. If you have green or blue eyes, this really just gives a little bit of color to the shadow, but still looks very neutral. The way that it complements blue and green eyes in the most subtle but beautiful way. This is a great transition shade if you're leaning more towards those cool tone rose shades. This other shade, Haux, was one of my favorite transition shades. It definitely leans more pink. It's warmer. It's also a matte. This is beautiful, really, for any of the shades that I showed you guys on the lids, like the Naked Lunch or the expensive, or I'm sorry, All That Glitters. Another one I'm thinking of is Expensive Pink, which I don't think I have in this palette, but that was one that I used a lot too. Haux was a nice complement to those colors. It's definitely darker than Quarry, so it is going to add a little more definition and depth to the eye. I also had the shade Cork, which is like such a MAC oldie and such a goodie. Again, I need to see if any of these are discontinued. By the time I edit this video and link everything, I'll be able to note which ones I can find and which ones I can't. But Cork is such a great transition shade for anyone that is my level or darker. You can see right here that it does pack a bit of a punch. It's a couple more colors deeper than my skin tone, and it's got some yellow to it. It's just a really nice transition shade. If you're doing a smoky eye and you're playing with like grays or like smoked out colors on the lid, I really like Cork in the crease because it gives like this really nice, it kind of warms up a smoky eye a little bit, and just it's just a beautiful transition shade. That's what I can say. And I used it a lot in the eyebrows too. When I started with MAC, obviously they increased the shade range quite a bit over the 7 years I was there, but Cork, I remember being kind of like all of the MAC artists go to either brow shade or crease color. Now this shade is such a beautiful transition shade. It's definitely a lot warmer. It's got a lot of orange to it. It's the shade Saddle, and you can see that it also is matte, but it has a lot of orange to it. So this is going to make green eyes or blue eyes pop. It is such a beautiful shade if you're doing like coppers on the eyes or some really warm colors on the eyes and the lid. It'll just be a nice transition for a warmer lid color. And I also had this shade in the palette. It's called Free to Be. I don't know if this was the limited or exclusive line, but it's more pinky orange, you can tell. This would be a nice, pretty transition shade. You could also use this on the lid for deeper skin tones. Like I would probably use this, anyone myself or tanner or darker. This would be really pretty on the lid to make or pull out any green in the eyes. It's a really pretty shade. Okay, so let's get into some shimmery bronze shades that I would use on the lid. I have the color Bronze, which is one of my favorite like classic bronze shimmer shadows. This is what it looks like. It's a really nice true bronze, and it's a frost, so you get a lot of pigment payoff. The shade Woodwinked, though, I have to say hands down kind of trumps bronze in my opinion of a really good, vibrant, like bronze shimmer shade. It's a little bit lighter than bronze. I remember there was like this time where all I wore was Woodwinked. I loved the texture of it, I loved the payoff of it, and I love the brightness of it. It's just a really bright gold. I feel like in the summertime, it is the perfect shadow for that really like bronze kind of goddess look if you're trying to do that in the summertime. It is such a nice nice shadow, not only in the color, but also in the way that it lays on the skin and the way that it reflects light. It's such a beautiful color. And I do think it's a color that all skin tones can wear. Obviously, if you're fair, it's gonna be a lot darker and kind of maybe give you a smokier bronze eye. But if you're my shade or darker, it's gonna be like a kind of almost like a brightness on the eye, like a mid-tone but bright bronzy eye. Okay, I feel like each time I pick up one, I'm like, this is my favorite. No, this one's my favorite. This is definitely one of my top 3. I would say top 3 MAC shades of all time. I get excited. Like here I am. I started this video out. I wasn't really in the mood to film a video because I filmed one before this. And now here I am sitting here talking about my favorite MAC shades. And I feel like we're hanging out. It's so fun. So this is the shade Patina. And this is a really unique shadow. And I feel like I have like a true love for this product right here. This was kind of my all over color on my lid for so long. That's how I like this color. I don't really like to use this in the crease. One, because it's frosty, and even though it's dark enough to be a transition shade, it reflects a lot of light. So it's not gonna create definition in the crease like I typically want, but on the lid, it's one of those colors that just looks so beautiful by itself. Like you don't even need to add anything else. You can just dust this on the lid, maybe pack it on your eyelid with your finger and then blend it up into the crease so it kind of fades out. It's that really unique shade that you literally can just wear on its own and it's beautiful. It's almost even more beautiful alone than when it's mixed or when it competes with other shades. It's called Patina and it's absolutely beautiful. I hope they did not discontinue this. To be honest, I don't really shop at MAC that much anymore. For no reason. I just don't find myself shopping at MAC very much. So sometimes I'll talk about products that are my favorites that I love, and then I'll go and I'm like, oh, that was discontinued 2 years ago. Whoopsie. Okay, Satin Taupe. Now this I like almost as much as Patina. However, it's more of a cool tone, kind of purpley shade. So that's kind of the biggest difference to me between this one and Patina. They're similar in the sense that I think that they make great standalone shadows. Like you really can just dust this all over the eyelid and be done. But it's obviously a lot more plummy and purple than the Patina. So this is the Patina, this is the Satin Taupe. But I like them both. I definitely lean more towards the Patina, but there was a time when I was wearing Satin Taupe all the time, when I was more into purples and plums. Okay, so now I have 2 shadows that I think kind of play off Patina and Satin Taupe. They're very similar. They're just a step up in terms of how dark they are. So the first one is Shale, and this one is a frosty kind of mid-tone purpley. It's got a lot more purple to it than the Satin Taupe does, but it's similar to the Satin Taupe in that sense. Let me show you the 2. So you can see the Satin Taupe is a bit more brown, a little more gray, and this definitely has more purple tones to it, but both are beautiful. If you like a deeper, like I would use the Shale for like a deeper, like sultry, smoky plum shadow. And then the next one I have is Tempting, which is, I want to say, what formula was this? This was not a frost. This was like their more glittery formula, I think. And it is a true like golden bronze with a high frost. It's very, very beautiful. For someone that wanted a bronzed, like very sparkly, high shimmer eye, that's what I would find myself using. I would put an eye paint on, and then I would pack that on with either my finger or a really stiff, flat brush. Whenever shadows have a lot of frost like that, or glitter, I should say, you typically have to use either your finger to apply them or a stiff, flat brush. Using a fluffy brush, you're gonna have a lot of fallout. It's gonna be harder to apply. Okay, we're almost done. We just have a few more shades here. I have the shade Espresso, and then I have the shade Charcoal Brown, which are very similar, and you can see that these are both darker matte brown shades. So this is what I would use, not necessarily in the crease, but I would usually always add one of these to the outer V. So I would use one of my normal transition shades, and then I would kind of build upon it and add one of these in the outer V, or I would use these on the lower lash line to smoke it out or to create a lower lash liner look. But I found myself using those a lot. Also, brows for darker skin or darker hair, I would use those also. Okay, and then I have 2 shades here that were my favorites, and they're very similar for what they are. Embark and Sketch. And I probably would say Sketch, I would say Sketch and Patina and Ricepaper were probably my 3 most used shadows of all time for MAC. Ricepaper, Patina, and Sketch, and it's light, medium, and dark. So this is what Sketch looks like. You can see that it's a dark, matte, kind of like eggplant shade, and this is what Embark looks like. So it's similar, but it's got a lot more red to it. This is more brown red, this is more purple. And I would use both of these for eyeliner a lot. I would also use it for the outer V. That again too, when you're packing your makeup kit, you wanna find, I didn't want to pack all my eyeliners. I would have a black liquid or a black gel cream and a brown gel cream, but anytime I was doing any other colored liners, I would usually lean towards shadows to create that since I could already have them there. But these are fantastic. I would use these all the time. And then the last one I had was Carbon. Carbon's their black matte eyeshadow. I feel like you have to have Carbon in your kit for eyeliner and just to deepen up any look that you might be doing. Okay, so let's move over to blushes and then we'll wrap this video up. So Peaches Blush, one of my favorite MAC blushes of all times. It's a sheer tone formula, so that means it's kind of foolproof. It initially goes on pretty sheer, but then you can build it to get more color. You can see that it looks really bright in the pan, but because it's a sheer tone, when it goes on, it gives just like the softest like peach glow to the skin. It is a matte, so it doesn't have any shimmer to it or any sheen, but I just found like it was so complimentary on the cheeks, especially with a tan. So pretty. I also had the shade Margin, which you can see I hit pan on. I don't know how many of these margins I have owned in my lifetime. This was one of my favorite MAC blushes at one time. This has a shimmer to it. It's definitely a warm peachy tone. You could use this as bronzer if you're a little bit lighter, but it's a beautiful, beautiful cheek color that's gonna give a little bit of a sheen. It has a nice, just kind of warm, soft peach tone to it. Not as bright as the Peaches, but still gonna give you that same kind of warm peachy look. And then I also had Gingerly, which is another sheer tone blush, but it is deeper in color than the Peaches. I would use this on darker skin tones. So someone that's more tan than myself and darker than that, I would use Gingerly as a nice soft peach shade on the cheeks. Okay, so moving into pinks, I had the shade Lovelorn, which, gosh, this one is so old. This shade is like one of the MAC originals, I think, and it's just a real true like bubblegum pink blush. It has a little bit of a sheen to it. Is it Lovelorn? It is Lovelorn, right? It's hard to read the bottom of this. It has a little bit of a sheen to it. I think it's one of those shades that just works really well on most skin tones. And then I had Pink Swoon. Okay, so Pink Swoon and Peaches are the equivalent to me. They both look really bright in the pan. They're both sheer tone blushes, so they're both going to, even though they look bright and intimidating, they're gonna go on more sheer and then you can build them for more color. So anytime someone wanted like a brighter pink cheek, I would go to Pink Swoon, or Peaches, I would go to Peach. Okay, and then I also had Plum Foolery, which is a plum shimmer blush shade, and I would use this on darker skin tones. It's a really pretty blush. I believe this one also is a sheer tone formula, just with a frost texture. And then the last pan that I had in this palette was Accentuate, which is a highlight. And I loved when MAC launched these. I hope they still carry these. They came out with a collection of highlight and contour shades. And I really loved Accentuate because it is bright, but it's kind of like sheer when it goes on the skin, so it's not too heavy. It's a great shade for underneath the eyes to just subtly brighten up the under eye area. The texture of it is, I wouldn't say it's totally matte. It has like the slightest sheen. Not shimmery at all, but just to where when you put it on the skin, it's going to give a very subtle sheen and reflection of light. It's really beautiful. It's really beautiful. When these launched, I remember like really highlighting under the eyes with Accentuate. Granted, I was a lot younger and I probably wouldn't put that much powder under my eyes today, but I remember it being really, really beautiful. And you could also use it as a brow highlight. You could also use it to kind of set the center of the face, just to set the foundation and give a little bit of brightness. All right, you guys, that wraps up this video. I would love to know what your MAC favorites are. Let me know in the comment section below. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. Don't forget to subscribe if you're not already. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you all in my next one. Bye.